everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullish Show. Today I have with me Yasir Drabu. Now, Yasir is originally out of Kashmir in India, but that was 25 years ago. And since then, he's actually invaded the United States and got a PhD and started a software company and other companies. He's a founder and CEO of Taazaa Inc. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and leads hundreds of passionate engineers for building advanced software solutions for finance, e-commerce, and other industries. He is passionate about finding promising new startups and helping them build the software they need to rocket to success. He enjoys working with thought leaders, learning their processes and needs, and then creating software products that make a meaningful impact on humanity. He's also the co-founder and CTO of Innago, creators of a cloud-based property management software that simplifies the rental process for landlords and tenants. So just to let everyone know, this is not a show about writing code. It's going to be more about the aspects and benefits of a world that seems to be taken over by software algorithms and AI. So welcome to the show, Yasir. It's actually great to have you here.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure being here and talking to you.
So Yasir, you have been embedded in almost all your education in science. So where did that come from? You're in Kashmir, which is a far-flung, beautiful corner of India up the north, and it's on my bucket list to visit one day. I've got to Delhi and I've got to Bombay/Mumbai. I'm still confused which name to give it because the Indians themselves are actually confused about it. So how did this interest, obviously in science and technology, rise?
Yeah, I think my parents obviously starts there. My mom is a teacher, and she was a science teacher at that, and I think some of it comes from there. But the first time I came across logic, and I was doing more of a electronics logic board, and I was like, wow, this is predictable and interesting. I think the light bulbs went off back then. I was probably in middle school, and then a friend of mine ended up getting access to a rare Commodore 64, which in India at that time was a rarity. And we ended up coding. We ended up coding together some games and small things. And each time we did something and made things move on the screen based on logic and algorithms, as you put it, it kept amazing me. And it kind of that journey continued as I went into high school, undergrad, and eventually grad school. So I guess it's somewhere around there, but it's been and it never stops to amaze me how much innovation has happened since the first time I've coded. So things have changed quite a bit. So
just for interest's sake, I most don't even know, but what sort of software or code were you using?
Back then, so I started, I think, in BASIC and then Pascal. Yeah, BASIC and Pascal is the two where we started my first attempt, and then eventually it evolved into C, C++, and then Java, and then .NET and C#, and eventually Node and all the newer languages. So.
Yeah, I tried to do BASIC, do some programming in BASIC when I was starting to do an accounting degree, which I didn't finish. In fact, I barely started because was consolidated spreadsheets and everything else. And then on top of that, they're actually asking you to try and do some programming in BASIC. I have no idea why, but I admire people like you that actually can code, because it used to be the meek shall inherit the earth, but now we say the geeks are inheriting the earth, and they're the ones that do software coding. And you're one of those, and I admire. It's a different way of thinking almost, really, isn't it? In terms of I think you either can do it or you can't. Is that true?
Yes, I think if you truly enjoy it, it is that binary. Has no pun intended there, but it is either you like it or you don't. So, but obviously there are people who make a living out of it and are decent at it, but they may be miserable sitting doing it, but it pays the bills in some cases. So there are those cases, but the ones who truly shine are the ones who really enjoy this, and they're like passionate about it. I've seen both, and the ones who really enjoy it and who get it and do it, they really thrive, and they can do really well. So
yeah, I've got a friend who's a mathematician, and he gets right into the abstract elements of maths. I just want to be add up, subtract, and divide, so and occasionally multiply. I can actually understand compound interest, so that's actually really important.
Yes,
Um,
a very, very important concept.
yeah. So when he starts talking to me after about 3 minutes, saying, "Trevor, I do not understand a word you're saying. Just he's been a friend for a long time, and I just say, stop right there, Trevor. Can we actually have a conversation about life or something else instead of
That's
abstract maths?" Any rate,
yeah,
but there's a beauty in maths, which is almost what we call almost say pure science, isn't it, in a
yeah,
sense?
it is. It is. It is.
So
And I think some
yeah,
of that leans into programming as well, right? Especially if you, anytime you deal with complexity, and you deal a lot of that with in software. So the only way to handle that for a human from a cognitive load standpoint is abstraction, right?
yeah,
So I appreciate your friend's point of abstraction. So you really need like, okay, this is the problem. You come, somebody will give you 20 problems, but then you kind of have to zoom out and say, oh, in general, this is the pattern or this is the abstraction of the problem, and then try to solve it that way.
yeah,
And abstraction is pretty powerful, especially for us, for our human minds to
yeah.
solve for.
See, I tried to sell software when I started in the computer industry back in the 1980s, and I really just didn't get it. I was trying to sell a software program called Revelation, which was a 4GL programming language.
Ah,
And I was trying to sell development. I I moved on to just selling hardware because I could actually see the box and going, that's a
yes,
computer. This will actually,
yes,
do spreadsheets. It'll actually allow you to send emails. So for me, that was my level of. But I was good at watching trends though, so I've written a few trends since that. But for me, what I've been blown away with, I think, just like you mentioned before, um, was the the amazing change that we've observed in technology since, especially I think since the personal computer came out in the mid 80s. I think
yes.
that's where technology became visible.
Yes, very, very. I think the PC revolution actually started it, and then the internet revolution accelerated it,
Yeah,
and now we're seeing almost the third wave or fourth wave, depending on which other ones you consider in between. But
yeah,
that's being very transformative. I mean, the amount of information you carry in your hand with the phone is just mind-boggling. If you just think even 10, 15 years ago, I
mm,
mean, 15 years ago, my parents were in Kashmir, and to call them, they had to come to the city because there was no direct trunk line, long distance calling to the place they were staying. So they had to come to the city to our uncle's place. This is just 15 years ago. Now I can do a video call with them wherever they are in their lawn in a remote part of Kashmir,
yeah,
and it's phenomenal. Just the communication part of it, and now if you look at what with Gen AI, how things are going to evolve in
yeah.
workflows and other things. So
It is amazing, and now we have AI. And I think what's interesting about a lot of technology, the PC democratized computing.
yes,
In other words, it put the power in the hands of the average human.
yes,
Not that we're all average. In fact, we're not average. We're all different and unique.
yes, yeah,
But it for me, just watching these continuing waves of technology. In fact, I have in my hand. I just grabbed it out of my drawer right then. This is a 15-year-old smartphone, Apple.
yep,
So that is one of the original iPhones. I think it mightn't have been the first model, but certainly I think at least model number two. But
true, yeah.
I just look at that. I remember my partner was sitting next to me one morning. It was a weekend. She said, "I'm in love." I said, "Oh, that's nice to know. Thank you." She said, "No, I'm not talking about you." He said, "I love this phone because of what it could do."
Wow, yeah, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
We have really passionate. I think Apple almost has created a cult-like following, at least till recently. They're floundering right now a little bit, in my opinion, but they
yes,
definitely have some amazing products. So,
yeah.
um,
So let's leap forward to today and well into where you went from being a PhD student who actually tried to work out how to actually make cellular phones talk to each other more easily in remote areas, which is what the thesis was apparently of your PhD. So when did you go from being a student? Because some people are perpetual students, they never
Right.
leave school. But you moved on to actually doing something, in other words, acting on your intelligence and your learning and your experience. When was that leap made from being a student to being an entrepreneur?
If I honestly, it was accidental. So there was no grand plan. It was just uh, I ended up, as you acquire skills like programming and others, you're helping people solve some problems. That's really basically where it started. I had somebody who needed help with, hey, I can't get this to connect to this, or this doesn't work. So it started very organically. And at one point, somebody said, hey, I want you to build this for me, and I'm going to pay you a bunch of money. I'm like, oh wow, and the light bulb went on. I said, okay, I can actually make a living off of this.
Yeah,
I'd set out to. I thought I would be more of in the teaching profession, uh, uh, and become a teacher. That's the reason I spent all those years doing a PhD. But uh, as I was helping different folks, whether they were small businesses or individuals solve their tech problems, I saw the same kind of impact that I could have, which I was hoping that I was doing at school as well, with teaching students or running labs for kids and things like that. So and this seemed more interesting, and slowly the shift came in there, and I think there were inklings of that in school, trying to sell small things to kids. And so there was an entrepreneurial aspect somewhere,
yeah,
but the academics and knowledge is where I initially leaned towards. But then, as I kept helping these people, it ended up accidentally one thing led to another, and then uh, the business kind of started evolving over a period of time. So, and being somebody who was an avid student, I kept learning how to do business. I have no business school experience. I to this day say I'm the worst salesman, but I had to sell for the company at some point and do everything in the business that I just thought I would never be doing. It pushes you in ways that you've run a lot of successful business yourself. So this has been a lifelong journey of learning, but in a different sphere of life, I guess.
yeah. So let's fast forward a day. So quite often the accidental entrepreneur is not that rare a beast. That's actually quite common. Sometimes an observation, or someone will pay me for my skill and expertise, oh, and then you move on, and then you hire someone to help you, and then you start learning about scaling, not
Yes.
doing it all yourself, and selling, and then you're going, well, I hate accounting, so I need to hire a bookkeeper, right? So because that,
Yes, exactly that way. So I
yeah,
think in hindsight is always 2020. Now, if I go back and if I run it backwards, I can say, oh, this is like the Japanese ikigai, right? You found what you love to do and you're good at it, and somebody's going to pay you for it. That's
yeah,
the perfect harmony of things. But
yeah.
that's more hindsight. It's not when you're not when you're going through the daily motions of life. So
Yeah, the Japanese philosophy of Ikigai is something I really love. The basically the distillation of finding your purpose,
yes,
and quite often it's accidental, and sometimes it's just the intersection of experience and life, both the good and the bad.
and yes, that's true.
And sometimes you need can gently move into it, and it just evolves. Other times, your life's blown up by someone else. Might be a relationship, it might be whatever. Or you might, but decide to blow it up yourself as well, as in, I'm going to make a big change, because as humans,
Yeah.
we're very afraid of change.
Yes, a lot of inertia.
Yeah. So, for me, the Ikigai idea of that intersection of experience, expertise, passion, and also what the world will pay you for, is it's a very difficult because it sounds simple, but we all know that it isn't.
It's not.
And uh, quite often, if you go looking for it just to make money, it doesn't work. Whereas you look to solve a problem and you're curious about something, just lean into it, then that happens. And I mention this all the time on my shows. Is Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss, and your bliss is basically just love programming and solving problems in an abstract way, which then solve real world problems for companies and businesses. So he said that he doesn't think there's one thing that we should be doing in life. He said just follow your bliss, which is following your curiosity and also what you're just really curious about. So let's look at today. We've had these huge technology shifts. And in less than 2 years, in fact, at the end of this month, we will have the anniversary of the public release of ChatGPT to the world.
Yep. Can't
So
believe it. Yeah.
it's, I think, November 30, 2022. So how has AI impacted your industry? And I'm interested in your thoughts about it. So we'll get into that a bit more. So how's AI impacted software development and also the businesses that you're writing code for as well? I'd be interested in what your observations are around AI and software and how you're seeing practical applications of it into business.
Sure. I think to start at the very basic level, I think it's made everybody a little bit more thoughtful if they integrate that AI tool into their daily lives. For example, our management team, others, when they incur a problem, earlier there would be an email that would be either reactionary or may not be fully fleshed out in thought. Right now, if they use this agent to go along with them, they actually are able to look at multiple dimensions of the problem, empathize more with what the problem is coming in. So I think even at the base level, having summarized digital knowledge of the world at your fingertips and being able to prompt it correctly to at least guide your thought process at the management level has helped our managers and senior leaders become better at communicating and also effectively thinking through a problem and presenting a meaningful solution that everybody can get their heads around. So I think
Mm.
it's just generally elevated the management practices within the company. Now,
Mhm.
moving further down, where we have programmers, we have a lot of our team members actually integrate with Copilot or other code aiding tools which help them remove some of the mundaneness of, they still need to solve the problem. I don't think AI is anywhere near solving the problem, but you know, it's simple plumbing stuff they don't need to worry about, but they can focus on the core problem, that the uniqueness of the algorithm. That's where the human ingenuity still is needed.
Mhm.
That's where they can focus on. Code quality improves, and I think productivity has increased a little bit. I won't say it's, some bigger companies are reporting 30 to 40% gains, but we're seeing 10 to 15%
Right.
gains in quality and outcomes. So I think just by the virtue of its existence in 2 years, which is unimaginable for the rapidness of this change and adoption, I think we are seeing it have a lot of positive impact on thought, on how to communicate, how to manage people better, and then on the coding side, being able to generate and support their coding practices and move things a little bit faster and more predictably. I think those are
Mhm.
some of the obvious things that we're seeing. The side effects of these are now how do we automate some things that people hate, right? So just as a very simple example, nobody dreams of having a life where they have to fill up timesheets at the end of the week to make sure our teams hate it, our engineers hate it. We don't like it, but it's necessary just from a transparency standpoint, reporting certain things to our customers, and we're trying to automate some of that using AI, right? So I think in the next wave, which is everybody's calling it agentic AI wave, is uh, which is what we are adopting in small measure right now, is automating some processes that just from a human day-to-day paper pushing. Nobody, we didn't wake up or come to this world, I'm gonna sit and fill timesheets and create TPG reports. So some of
Yeah.
those things that are not inspiring for a human being will be the next frontier,
Yeah.
in at least in the near future. So
You raised an interesting point talking about AI agents, which appears to be the next phase of AI from my
yeah,
observation.
yeah,
And Salesforce just released at Dreamforce this year their Agent Force app. Because what's great about AI and ChatGPT is it can help you ideate. It also can mix things up in a different way that break your fixed thinking because
yes,
we've tapped into the wisdom and creativity and intelligence of the planet because it's all captured in ones and zeros. And large language models help you make sense of 8 billion people that are here today,
Mm.
and the billions that have been before us, and the books that have been captured and put into the data and the information, which is overwhelming. So an AI agent, from what I observed, is AI where actually it's not just about ideas, it's actually implementing the ideas. And you just mentioned one, which is actually doing worksheets or timesheets. Can you tell us a little bit more about AI agents and what's happening now and where do you see them going? I'd be intrigued.
Sure. I think obviously there's Microsoft and others who are way further along on this, but the way we see agents are, there's a lot of enterprise need, right? Which is where we focus right now, where there's a lot of processes that are very, very manual. I mean, if you look at even simple things like, which you mentioned, accounting, right? Which you never made into, and I don't like, but there is a need for invoicing, collecting payments, just the day-to-day operational business pieces. There are parts of that, like simple things like account reconciliation, those kind of things that will get automated through agents. Now, what they do is they look at historic data. You create a enterprise AI model, which has a lot of inputs from existing data within the organization, which is proprietary. And I think organizations are realizing more and more that their proprietary data is what's going to differentiate them in the future. If
Right.
so, they're going to be very protective about that, and they're going to not let the larger open source models leverage that. They want to keep that to their. That's how they would bring in a uniqueness to the world. So now they would take what we're seeing is a lot of these data sources getting aggregated and fed uh, uh, into these language models using something called RAGs, or there are a few other techniques where uh, you could then bring in the intelligence of the organization into the agents, and then you then with guardrails and testing, you can actually then invoke what you call APIs or robotic automations into other other aspects of the business to automate certain things, right?
Mm.
So it can be a simple as something as simple as a Monday morning thought leadership email that goes out, or something more mission critical that's along the lines of making sure we are compliant on certain quality metrics and things like that. So there's a lot of those things that we do currently manually, which will slowly be done more automatically. Um, uh, and then made accessible to everyday business operators. So I think that's where the agents are kind of going, right? So they're going to get more autonomous. If you look at just 5 years or 10 years ago, you would have software systems as modules, right? They would be built using this function, or this service and that service. Now it's more like, here's a collection of agents, and somebody's an orchestrator of these agents, and they're going to go do their own thing, get the work done, and then report back to the main agent, and then that would summarize it further up. It's an interesting architectural model, and I think it'll bring about some newer use cases that were very hard to solve in the traditional sense, right? So,
Yeah.
that's where I think it would go. And if you look at the commercial side, like on the B2C side, you can say, hey, I want to go on a vacation next week, and here are all it has your preferences. So everybody's in the future is going to have their own PA, personal assistant, that does 90% of the stuff that they don't want to do, is my guess. That's where it's going to get to.
Yeah, so it's I suppose we're all just learning into this next phase of it because I do see AI agents as maybe the next primary phase that actually brings the biggest benefit. Um, so you mentioned the thing too about proprietary, in other words, what makes a business different to another business, and then it comes down to proprietary data, and it's also their particular way of looking at the world or at
Yeah.
business.
Yep. Yep.
And then we find companies go out and patent that. But you mentioned the fact about you want to keep that data within boundaries. In other words, you don't want to give your data and insights to the large language models that are open source because that means anyone can copy what you do if they look hard enough. And it's sitting in the cloud of AI's large language models.
Yeah.
So, and something was raised with me about 6 to 9 months ago about the fact that we need to look at how we protect our proprietary data
Yeah.
and use it in the wisest way to give us a competitive advantage. So, what's some examples that you are seeing emerging where uh, industries are going or companies are going, okay, we're not going to release this data to the world, into the wild. We're actually going to keep it in our zoo. Have you got any
Yeah.
examples?
So I think there's your traditional way, right? So people are protecting them with firewalls, encryption, and all of that. So there's one that's your traditional way of thinking about data is, hey, we have a lot of data, let's protect it with all, put it behind closed doors and only give it access through access control and policies and things like that. That's an approach, and I think it works largely, but you've also seen a lot of data leaks and hacks which eventually end up, I think at this point, I think all my personal data is on the dark web because the number of hacks that have been in different
Oh, yeah.
agencies across the organization, it's impossible to know that. Now, on the other side, if you look at how do you flip that model? Can you invert that model and say there's an initiative called the Smart Data. It's an idea, but and a protocol where the data actually is inherently encrypted and is designed to only made accessible under certain conditions. So if we flip the model and make the each data packet, let's say it's my name, but it's encrypted and it has certain keys and locks on it, and it's only opens under certain conditions, uh, that data is inherently going to be secure. So there's ways that companies are thinking about, okay, if I share my data with somebody and they're contractually only supposed to do certain things with it, they don't go out and sell it to somebody else, right? Like data marts and other things are pretty common. So I think there's either using some sort of blockchain to do smart contracts plus smart data protocols, which will inherently encrypt data by default, given how much computing power we have. 10 years ago, the fact that you could encrypt everything was like considered stupid and insane, but now now it's quite possible with data storage being cheap and encryption being fast and dedicated chips for that. So I think there's going to be a flip in the way we look at it. There's going to be the traditional, here's my here's my data and I'm going to protect it with all the firewalls. But then the other is going to be, I'm going to encrypt my data in a way that only based on the smart contract that I can open it up only for that specific purpose. Otherwise, you cannot see it.
Mhm.
So that's where I think eventually data is going to go, and then you can say I can see this data only in the U.S. or in Australia, but I cannot see this data in Russia or China. It can be as sophisticated as that, or who can see it, what part they can see. Those are the things that I think these new protocols will put into place is to protect data. I think ultimately what people are realizing with these AIs is data is going to be the key differentiator as it's going to be data, knowledge, and then eventually wisdom. It's not just data itself, but so there's that whole pyramid of that. So
Yeah. Yeah, just you mentioned the word wisdom, and uh, there's a lot of information, but there seems to be very little wisdom in the world, especially
yes.
currently, because we add to that disinformation, fake news, and the list goes on. I recently actually read a piece on can AI enhance human wisdom, and I think it can. And I'd be interested in your thoughts on how maybe AI can increase humanity's wisdom, which is basically applying information and knowledge wisely and safely for the benefit of mankind. Let's make it as simple as that. That's maybe simplifying it, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on how AI can help us make wiser decisions.
I think that there's this fear of AI generally, and I think many people say this. It's going to be people who do not use AI versus people who use AI. That's going to actually be the differentiator. So
Mm.
when you use AI, what that means is it's enabling you to augment your thought process and breaking out of that thought mold that you're talking
Yes.
about. I think as long as we as human beings are open to that, and we review the vast knowledge and that's been created, and we're standing on the shoulder of giants, as we put it. If we leverage that information, it's amazing how much information is summarized and referenced, and you can quickly digest, right? Uh, Earlier, you would have a book to read on a certain principle. Now you can get the summary of the book to at least have a shortcut in your mind as to what
I
the
do
book
that.
is
I
about.
do that regularly. I go summarize
Yes,
1,000 words and give me actionable takeaways and key points.
exactly, exactly.
And it's
So
so
as
good.
long as exactly, as long as you do those kind of things, you're breaking your own lack of knowledge or understanding in certain areas. And then if you understand, uh, uh, I don't know how else to say it, but I think the what we call the DIKW pyramid, which is data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, and you can kind of figure out how to work that up. Uh, you, I mean, I think we as humanity will benefit. Now we don't want to be bargs, and everybody kind of has the same mindset, and I think that's unlikely given how different we are as human beings, but it actually helps us kind of evolve our own thinking and expand as long as we're open to learning. Obviously, if we be dogmatic or rigid about religion, and there's a lot of sensitive things that we don't seem to get past. But if we are open to that learning mindset, the growth mindset, and the curiosity that you mentioned earlier, like it's one of our core values at our company is curiosity. If
Yes.
you're not curious enough, you cannot learn. If you cannot learn, you cannot get better. If you cannot get better, you can't create new things. So
Yeah.
I think there's vital, and I think AI actually has expanded my personal horizons, and I've seen a sea of change in a lot of people around me who are able to produce more meaningful, thoughtful dialogue and conversation uh, that has been enabled by just simple summarizations or
Yeah.
being able to interact with the AI model. So
Yeah. I love what you mentioned too about escaping your own thought bubbles.
yeah,
And for me, AI, because we're all raised in certain schools, certain cultures, certain religions, certain tribes, certain ways of education, different types of schools, which I certainly, for me, I feel like I've been trapped by that.
yes,
But it's also made me who I am. But trying to escape those bounds for me is like there's much more out there. And that's where I think AI adds that X factor to us almost becoming polymaths that are escaping fixed thinking, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. It is. I mean, when I was naive and younger, I said I want to be a polymath. That's so amazing. You can learn about art, history, mathematics, and be good at everything.
Yeah.
As you age, you realize your limitations, but in general, at least AI can actually help amplify some of those core human desires of being able to elevate your own thought process and
Yeah.
being able to communicate using meaningful tools. So
Yeah.
I think if nothing else, it will help us if we adopt it in a meaningful way. Of course,
Yeah.
it can help us be better human beings, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I interviewed a polymath recently, earlier this year, Nick Bostrom, out of Oxford University professor who's a polymath. He's got like neuroscience, economic, like PhDs just pouring out of him.
Wow, amazing.
And he's written two books. One's called Super Intelligence, written in 2014, and the other one lately this year was Deep Utopia, which first one was dystopian. This one, Deep Utopia, was utopian. And interviewing him was actually quite daunting because here's a brain that just operates in a different way. And but in one sense, AI can give us that ability at a certain layer. And if I don't understand something, one of my key things I'm trying to work out now is we're trying to communicate with each other, and we use one word, but I've discovered that almost every word is what I call a suitcase word. In other words, you open the suitcase, and inside that suitcase is multiple, sometimes dozens of meanings for one word.
Mm.
Happiness, what does that mean to you? It could be something different to you as it is to me.
Yes. Yep.
And the
Makes
list
sense.
goes on. Success, what does that
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
So so for me, having access to the wisdom, intelligence, creativity, and ancient wisdom of the world within AI's distillation of humankind's mind and heart and soul and creativity. It's for me, I just find it mind-boggling.
And I think that's why AI safety and other things are important. And just as you said, fake news, incorrect information is it's harder to do than I know some of the companies put guardrails around it, and the guardrails themselves are biased based on cultural biases, right? So I think the way Chat GDP works versus Claude, they come from different countries. Their guardrails are very different, and you realize that okay, they're doing their best, but it's a very different, take on what is what's how to distill and put those guardrails in place. So I think
Yeah,
those biases will carry into the models, but as we refine our, our opinion on things and our thought process as it evolves. And I think that will reflect in this and just help us
yeah,
augment our thought process.
yeah. I came across by the head of CEO of NVIDIA. Um, he's one of the things he talked about along with 𝓵𝓵𝓻𝓷, that we need to consider things like maybe sovereign AI, because AI is almost the homogenization of humanity, because it's
That's a
basically
concern.
so almost an amalgamation of humanity. So what happens is that the voices of indigenous people that are small minorities lost in the noise, and so each country's got indigenous people. They've got different mixes of faiths, religions, culture. Um, Australians will use words that Americans would have no idea what we're talking about, like "g'day, mate." Okay, said that with his buddy. Um, you know, put a shrimp on the barbie. All that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I've thought about it. It's like I think governments maybe need to consider creating sovereign AI, which is a big investment, but it's almost an investment in the culture of a country or a nation. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
I think that's actually very important. That's why I think I made a reference to the Borg, which is actually a sci-fi series called the Star Trek, in which they encounter a Borg. You can look it up later. I'm not sure if you, it's a, so the Borg essentially is one queen and everybody's minds melded together and they act as one monolith. And uh, the homogenization is really what I was getting at is if everybody reads the same model and it's the same way, uh, do we end up becoming thinking the same way and don't lose some of that creativity, not necessarily creativity, the distinction of each culture. So I
Mm.
think whether you want to call it sovereign AI or something that is understands the cultural nuance of different cultures, that I think becomes very important. So that's why it's important to not have like OpenAI be the only biggest model in the world. I think countries or other tech companies across the globe need to address that nuance and distinction of every culture. So something that's you know in the US, for example, eating steak is something delicious, but in India it's probably culturally forbidden. So
Right.
so I think
Because
I mean,
because cows are sacred. That's why.
yes, yeah, exactly. So I think the obviously I'm oversimplifying it, and some of this is captured in these models. But to your point, I think there needs to be that sovereign UI or culturally different depending on which countries
Yeah.
models there are, so that they're not drowned. Those voices are not drowned in that homogeneity of things. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just reflecting on the two countries you've lived in your life, India
yep.
and the USA. And before AI, we've had homogenization of culture, which is actually being broken up a bit now, which is Hollywood dominated the world in terms of entertainment and still does to a point. On the other side, we've got Bollywood in India,
Yeah.
and Bollywood's growing and growing and growing. So what we have is we've got like the Indian culture breaking out, going, hang on, we've got some good shit here as well.
Yes.
Um, we're funny and we can write good stories and we can create good movies. And on top of that, there's is also the music industry. And we're seeing the rise through networks and communication, they're global now, as the rise of, African music, that's getting into mainstream.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to watch. So yeah, but I think we want the world to be an interesting place. There's nothing
Yes.
more boring than just vanilla ice cream every night, right?
Up. Yeah. Like when I talk to as I said, I had some extended family. When I talk to them, they've adopted a lot of Australian lingo, and he's like, "What's up, mate?" I'm like, "When did that happen?" I mean, that's just, that's just a one piece of it, but I think, but that makes it interesting. We love the different dialects, we love the different languages. There's just ideas and expressions that each language can better express, right? Whether it's Hindi in India or Urdu or Spanish, English, they all have their strengths, but they also, other languages have terms and things that are unique to them. I think uh, ultimately celebrating that diversity has to kind of
Yeah.
flow into these models as a whole. I'm an optimist on these things, so we'll
Well,
see.
I'm generally an optimist as well, and
Mm,
for me the diversity is both can be a joy or a blessing and a curse. And like I've been to India 4 times, which isn't a lot, but it's 4 times, and because of the melting pot that is India, I'm sometimes not quite sure what to do.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of contradiction, right? So there's the old versus new, and a lot of things come up as contradictions. So anyway,
You know,
uh,
I just feel like I'm living in a pool of paradox in India, especially.
it is a pool of paradox. I mean, there's a lot of change, structural, economic, social changes that have happened, and then there's obviously, there's a little bit of a pullback from that as well. So I think it's definitely a very diverse ecosystem of cultures and people and
Yeah.
languages. I mean, there's so many languages in food. It's just, it's mind-boggling.
It's almost for me, it's almost overwhelming because it's so complex and also so populous. Mumbai's, you walk through the streets and walk through the parks, and there's, you know, 50 cricket games going on in a park, near the center of Mumbai, right? And then you go through the slums, which you just, watch humanity trying to survive. And
Yeah.
uh, but then you've got the wealth that sits in the big cities as well. So you've got this just constant extremes. India especially brings to the table, and it's yeah, yeah, I just find it amazing. But I do feel overwhelmed when I go to India. That's why I've actually had Indians who have been my guides to help me make a little bit of sense of it. So it's great.
And I'm looking forward to getting to Australia enjoying some of the beach and the sunshine soon.
We've got great beaches here, so you're most welcome. So just to wrap it up, you see, it's been absolutely fabulous chatting about life and software. I don't know how that happened, but that's fine, and AI as well. So I want to ask you one question. What brings you deep joy? If you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day? What brings you deep joy?
I keep saying I'm a builder, so I like building things that actually help people. I think uh, no amount of money can bring that joy. I think at the end of the day, you can only drive one car and you can only eat 3 meals a day and you can live under one roof. So I think the joy is in creating things that bring meaning to the world. I mean, as long as I can do that, that'll bring me the deepest joy. And sharing that with uh, immediate friends, family, and then the broader world as a whole,
Yeah,
hopefully.
love it. I think we are humans, we are creators, but we also need to share that gift with the world. And I think
Yes.
um, for me, um, I enjoy writing. I enjoy doing podcasts. And for me also, I'm curious about a lot of things, especially the intersection of AI and humanity, because AI asks big questions of humanity.
Yes, it does. It does.
But I think it's great to hear that you love creating and making a difference in the world. And I look forward to if you visit Australia, stick up your hand, let me know you're coming, and we'll look after you and take you out in the harbour and show you a different world.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that kind invitation. So,
Thanks, Yasir, and thank you for bringing your gift to the world, even though I don't understand it. Um, how you do it. That's maybe more.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Yasir.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure talking to you, Jeff.
Okay.